Sitting together, he used to be a young man of 20, traveling across the country, challenging over 100 martial arts schools. But he was rejected and oppressed by the martial arts community because his moves were too cruel. Therefore, he could only choose to hide in the martial world. His name is Diem from the Heijian martial arts lineage. Initially, he thought that with his top-notch martial arts skills, he could become famous everywhere. But now, he can only take care of an old, run-down shop. Recently, he was diagnosed with acute leukemia, so he always feels fuzzy and tired, living day by day in darkness. One day, unexpectedly, a man and a woman came to the shop. The woman asked if he was Diem. Diem was slightly surprised and asked why the woman was here. The woman introduced herself as Loiting, the manager of the Chinese Martial Arts Association from Guangdong, and her grandfather's name is Loi Hong Sin. According to seniority, she must call him An Trey, elder brother. When Diem knew the woman's identity, his attitude became more enthusiastic. During the conversation, Diem inquired about Loi's health. Upon hearing this, Loitin said that her grandfather had passed away last year. Hearing this, Diem stood silent. Tea spilled from the cup, and it took a while for him to recover. Although Diem was still too young at that time, Loi Hong Sin still imparted all his knowledge to him. When he learned that Loi had passed away, Loitin clearly explained the reason for this visit. She wanted to invite Diem to Guangdong to be an advisor to the Martial Arts Association. Upon hearing this, Diem asked how she knew he could help. Seeing this, Loitin explained that his reputation was renowned, and it was better than disgrace. They didn't respect him, but they were certainly afraid of him. Diem bluntly said that fear wouldn't help her. She was too late because he had just been diagnosed with leukemia, so this trip of hers was in vain. Seeing this, Loitin didn't give up but advised Diem to continue his martial brotherhood. The Martial Arts Association was the lifelong dedication of her grandfather, and she couldn't just stand by and let others turn it into a tool of power or their own advantage. At this point, Diem's face showed a scornful and disdainful expression. He stated that what he hated most was those grandiose schemes, but he couldn't distinguish her from those people. In short, he was a weakling who couldn't help. If she wanted to stay for dinner, he would make dumplings for her. If not, he invited her to leave and light incense for her grandfather. Diem ordered the guests to leave, and Loitin didn't insist anymore. She left a business card on the table and told Diem that her grandfather had taught countless disciples, but he particularly valued him. Did he know how highly her grandfather regarded him? A martial artist must have 3 parts of evil in his heart, and among many disciples, only he had exactly those 3 parts accurately. Whether he agreed or not, she still hoped that those 3 parts of evil in him hadn't disappeared yet. Loiting said this and walked out of the shop, got into the car, and drove away. Diem smiled bitterly, intending to close the shop and rest. But suddenly, a large hand blocked the rolling door. The blocker was a man with no eyes and a terrifying face like a ghost. Diem's heart pounded at the sight. He recognized him as Loiting's bodyguard. The bodyguard didn't say anything but kicked high towards him. Diem was caught off guard, hastily raised his hand to block, but was still kicked hard and fell to the ground. Even the floor tiles shattered. Before Diem could react, the bodyguard advanced and kicked him in the chest. Diem raised his hand to protect himself and simultaneously struck a powerful blow to the guard's knee joint. The guard's right leg immediately made a cracking sound. Diem took advantage of the moment when his opponent was in pain to stand up, facing the guard, making him feel nauseated. Next, Diem stretched out his hand and grabbed the guard's shoulder tightly, simultaneously grabbing his wrist, then delivered a powerful punch, turning the guard over onto the ground. A fierce gleam flashed in Diem's eyes. His right hand suddenly increased in strength. In just a second, the guard's arm was broken. Diem paralyzed one leg and one arm of his opponent, causing him to groan in pain, then collapse on the ground. Diem turned to grab the phone, but unexpectedly, the guard growled and rushed forward to attack him from behind. Diem kicked accurately, hitting him in the neck, causing him to break his neck and die on the spot. Seeing the guard's body hit the cupboard, Diem said slowly, "That was quite scary." Suddenly, Diem felt intense pain in his bones, his head spinning, and strange images flashed in his mind. He opened his eyes in horror, wondering if he was about to die from leukemia. His head spun through memories, from the doctor's announcement of his leukemia diagnosis to the battles he had fought, or a blurry woman being bound by iron chains. At this moment, a fat man clapped his hands and walked in, startling him awake. He thought about whether it was real or just a dream, or his skillful kicking. Once having the upper hand against the opponent, they could only take the hit. Unexpectedly, he was defeated by a move, turning failure into success. Sure, here is the translation of the passage. In the martial world, it is rumored that the Lai family's double sword technique from He Jiang is exceptional. His martial arts skills are also very sharp, right? Diem tried to endure the pain, sat up, and asked where the girl who had just come in had gone. The fat man laughed cheerfully and pointed towards the counter. Diem also turned back in surprise when he realized that the ghostly figure from earlier had disappeared. Diem sat back down on the sofa and asked the fat man what he was here for. After being pointed out, he said he had no connection to the people from earlier, but the similarity between them was their interest in him. He asked Diem not to mind, mentioning that he was just borrowing an idea from the bodyguard. He introduced himself as Guang Duom, or Mac, and jokingly asked if Diem wanted to eat dumplings. Then, he laughed loudly and said he might be able to cure Diem's leukemia using a more advanced method, bone marrow transplantation. Diem immediately sat up, asking what he needed to do. He approached and said to try it out, as in any case, it's just death. But this is a path of no return. Diem laughed at the response, realizing that anything was better than waiting to die. After receiving the affirmative answer, suddenly he waved his hands and thick black smoke rushed into the shop. The black smoke immediately enveloped Diem, and this strange scene made him open his eyes in astonishment. In the next moment, he felt like he was falling into the ninth circle of hell, with countless strange images flooding his mind. After a long while, Diem slowly opened his eyes, but was surprised to find himself in an underground martial arts arena. Two fighters were fiercely battling on the stage, surrounded by enthusiastic spectators cheering. Diem rubbed his temples in confusion, feeling disoriented. He glanced around and realized that this was an illegal underground fight, and the fat man was nowhere to be seen. Just then, an information window appeared within his sight. Diem understood that it was preparing a new identity for him, without being detected by anyone. Following that, a task board appeared detailing the missions he needed to complete, as well as character attributes. He had been training in martial arts since childhood and had almost reached the maximum level, but the symptoms of leukemia were still evident. Before Diem could fully absorb all this information, a shadow suddenly patted him on the shoulder. Diem unconsciously grabbed the person's wrist, but the man in European clothing immediately cursed and shouted at him to let go. Diem thought of a task in the list, which was to fight in the 7th arena, so he stood up and followed the man to the arena. At that moment, he was extremely excited. The fat man had brought him to Hong Kong in 1986, where he was sure he could find a cure for his leukemia. The MC in the arena was extremely excited, introducing the martial artist as the main character of the night, Chai, famous for winning 6 consecutive matches. The entire audience erupted into cheers like a tsunami. Diem smiled coldly, his mouth curling up at the corners. Just then, Chai chose his first opponent, pointing directly at Diem, who had just appeared. Diem was ready to test his strength in this new world. As they faced each other, the atmosphere was intense. Diem leaped onto the stage while the MC continued to praise Chai's achievements. Diem remained silent in a defensive stance, ready to use the 7th Kui Chuang technique. Chai did not hesitate either. He lunged forward with a punch to Diem's face, but unexpectedly, Diem swiftly dodged to the side, avoiding his opponent's fist. Then, he rushed towards Chai's flank. His left hand pushed up to deflect the straight punch, while his right hand dropped down like a knife, aiming for Chai's throat. The opponent hurriedly tilted his head to avoid the attack, but in his haste, his footwork became disordered. Diem immediately slipped behind him and delivered a swift kick to the back of his knee, causing him to lose balance and fall to the ground. The man in white clothes sitting in the audience saw this and applauded, praising the precision of Diem's Kui Chuang technique. At that moment, Chachai got back up, no longer underestimating his opponent. He cautiously raised his hands, preparing for the next move. Diem attacked first, rushing forward to punch him in the face. Chachai quickly clasped his hands together to block, then leaped up to kick Diem in the head. But to his surprise, Diem managed to block the kick. After blocking the punch, Diem immediately lifted his knee to block the other kick, the sound of bones breaking clearly audible. In the next second, Chachai collapsed to the ground, screaming in agony like a pig being slaughtered. Everyone knew that his Thai boxing was fierce, but they didn't expect that Diem's Kui Chuang technique was just as deadly. The MC, stunned by the scene on the stage, stood frozen, while the audience erupted into cheers. Many people exclaimed in anger for having bet on the wrong martial artist. At that moment, Diem reminded the MC to announce the result. The MC, startled awake, announced Diem's victory. It was a feeling Diem hadn't had in a long time. Then, Diem turned to the MC and asked why it wasn't a deathmatch. "So who am I fighting next?" At this point, the man in the white shirt laughed loudly and explained, "Hey kid, in Diem Than, the arena only opens when there are bets placed. Someone just placed bets on Chachai to fight continuously. If nobody bets on you, you can only go down to the stage." The man in the white shirt stood up, put his hand into his shirt pocket, took out 50,000 NDT, and said, "Would you dare to fight me? Whether you win or lose, the 50,000 NDT is yours." In Diem's eyes, the 50,000 NDT seemed like a huge amount of money, especially in the 80s. Diem was hesitating whether to accept this condition or not when suddenly a notification appeared within his sight, stating that in the world of Diem Phu, money could be exchanged for Diem Phu points. Although he wasn't sure about the functions of Diem Phu points, Diem decided to agree to the condition of the boss. Before this, a staff member from the martial arts hall ran out, saying that it wasn't according to the rules. However, the boss scolded him severely and kicked him away. The man in European clothing stepped aside eagerly, looking up at the stage. Unable to stop the boss, the man in European clothing approached Diem and said he could continue winning fights if he wanted to. According to Diem, just one fight was enough. Diem wiped the blood from his nose, which was caused by his leukemia, and said he knew what to do. Despite still having a fever due to the illness, the excitement of fighting made him extremely thrilled. At this point, the boss ordered his men to send Tiu Ka, a disciple of the 8th Kui Chuang master, to fight. Tiu Cha had trained under a master of the 8th Kui Chuang, who belonged to the Train sect, and had suffered 5 broken ribs from him, leaving a grudge in his heart. Therefore, he always wanted to fight the successor of the 8th Kui Chuang. Hearing the boss's order, Tiu Cha immediately jumped onto the stage and bowed, introducing himself as Doja Qian Cha Dai Dao, inviting Diem to compete. The exchange of martial arts techniques between sects was a rule in the martial world. However, most of Diem's martial arts skills were from his family's tradition, so he only coldly said, "Hey Jiang." This introduction angered Cha Dai Dao, who thought Diem was looking down on him. Without saying anything more, Cha Dai Dao swiftly attacked Diem. Diem raised his hand to block Cha Dai Dao's weak strike and pushed down to block Tiu Chao's knee kick. After successfully blocking the first wave of attacks, Diem intended to step back, but unexpectedly, his opponent reacted extremely quickly, advancing to punch him hard in the face. A sudden burst of force transferred to him upon impact. Using reflexive force, Diem jumped back to create distance from his opponent. In surprise, Tiu Cha was indeed a master, not a clueless novice, with extraordinary skills in Doja Qian. After saying that, Diem tightened his fist, getting ready to fight seriously. "Be careful, I'll fight for real," he said seriously. As he finished speaking, Diem bent down and rushed forward like lightning, delivering a powerful punch towards Tiu Chao's face. But unexpectedly, a cold voice suddenly rang out, "Stop, Diem." Diem couldn't help but startle, immediately halting his attack. Both fighters looked towards the direction of the voice. The man in the white shirt also turned his gaze, only to see a group of people advancing. Leading them was a red-haired young man, who turned out to be Hong Kwai, the manager of this martial arts hall. Seeing Hong Kwai's aggressive approach towards the man in the white shirt, he said, "Why can't we watch fights in Diem Than? Your dispute with Mr. Ngo is your business. We just come to the arena to make a living. But you treat my arena as a cockfighting pit. You like to go up, then go up. You like to go down, then go down. That's against the rules." Faced with Hong Kwai's firm attitude, the man in the white shirt remained silent. Tiu Ka, seeing his boss being humiliated, immediately jumped down to say, "According to the rules, what should I do to fight him?" Hong Kwai said that Tiu Cha had to start from the first stage, and if the referees deemed his and Lydium's achievements equivalent, they would arrange for the two to fight each other. Upon hearing this, Tiu Cha was excited and looked eagerly at his boss. His boss nodded immediately, agreeing to allow him to compete in the Diem Than arena before leaving. Tiu Ka then turned to Lai Diem, clasped his hands and said, "There aren't many traditional martial artists on the Kulong stage. Today, my disciples have been waiting for you to stand firm. They will have a fair fight." Seeing him preparing to leave, Lai Diem called him back and asked if 50,000 NDT was still valid. Hearing this, Tiu Cha chuckled and said it was still valid. Shortly after, he received 50,000 NDT. After receiving the money, Lai Diem decided to exchange it for Diem Phu points. The information in the frame changed, indicating that he had received 5 Diem Phu points. In this Diem Phu event, unlocking the right to purchase items was added. Now he understood that Diem Phu points could buy all sorts of things, such as skills to identify others' weaknesses or special medicines to alleviate his leukemia symptoms. Seeing the shopping right, Lai Diem's eyes lit up as he found a cell regenerative supplement to cure leukemia. This was surely the promise made by the fat man. The medicine cost 300 Diem Phu points. Seeing this, Lai Diem's lips curled slightly. It meant he needed to earn 3 million NDT within a month in Hong Kong in the 80s. Leaving the martial arts hall, Lai Diem returned to his place in the Diem Phu event. This time, he was arranged to play the role of a martial artist for Hong Kwai. Lai Diem remembered Hong Kwai's words to him. "At Diem Than, this land is only 1.5 hectares wide. The organizers are the big shots here. If the organizers say something, no gang dares to speak up. Although you are my fighter, in reality, you work for the Thaitu faction. Thaitu is an executive member of the organizing committee and also my boss. All the big and small arenas in Diem Than are managed and operated by Thaitu. From now on, you just focus on fighting under my guidance. Money, women, brothers, everything will be provided to you." After that, Lai Diem understood more. Currently, he was competing in grade 4. Winning one match could earn him 5,000 NDT. The higher the grade, the more a fighter could earn, such as in weapon fights, where someone might die in a night, and earning tens of thousands was normal. Rethinking, Lai Diem put his hand into his pocket, having exchanged all 50,000 NDT for Diem Phu points. Now, he only had a few loose coins left on him. Lai Diem sighed lightly. Earning 3 million in a month was not easy. Just then, an orange cat approached Lai Diem. Lai Diem was amused and prepared to bend down to pet it. But a girl ran up and picked the cat up. Lai Diem asked the girl where room 413 was, the one Hong Kwai had arranged for him. The girl hugged the cat and looked at Lai Diem hesitantly, feeling that he didn't seem like a bad person. She then led Lai Diem to the apartment building. Shortly after, they arrived at room 413 to thank the girl. Lai Diem offered her some pain relief candies he usually used. At that moment, a hoarse voice from the opposite door was heard asking who was talking. Upon hearing that, the girl quickly ran back home. Lai Diem stared at the door opposite, finding the voice quite strange. Meanwhile, at a casino in Diem Than, a bespectacled man lost a gambling game and angrily slammed a wooden box onto the table, asking how much it was worth. The staff opened the box to reveal several ancient scrolls, one of which depicted an unclear handprint. The man in glasses was immediately escorted out by the bodyguards, who mocked him for trying to exchange torn papers for money. Unbeknownst to them, behind them, a shadow held a stone and struck the bespectacled man hard, causing him to collapse in pain. The shadow then took out the scrolls from the box and, with a cold smile, discovered that they were indeed valuable relics that they didn't understand. The fearful man hurriedly crawled out, begging for mercy, but the merciless shadow raised the stone again, smashing it down and killing the bespectacled man despite his pleas. Diem, in his entire life, had never lost in martial arts fights. Even when traveling to Long Than in the 80s, he continued to win consecutively. Hearing someone calling him back, he turned around and saw Hongkwai waving at him from the stage. Diem's overwhelming strength had prevented other masters from daring to step onto the stage, so Hongkwai decided to take him to larger venues to fight. Excited, Diem agreed immediately. As they walked to the Ngaiafu skyscraper in silence, Hongkwai provided Diem with some information. The most important thing was to find a major sponsor. Now, he would introduce Diem to a wealthy woman. In a dimly lit room, a beautiful white woman was sitting on a sofa. Hongkwai walked in, smiling, and greeted the woman before introducing Diem. Mimicking Hongkwai's way of addressing her, Diem called the girl Judai. Judy observed Diem with interest before commenting on his appearance, wondering if he had the ability to stand on the stage. She assured him that even if he couldn't, she would support him regardless of the amount of money involved. At this moment, Diem held the microphone, telling his boss to come up on stage, implying that he would take a plunge. Hearing this, Judai quickly got up from the sofa, approached Diem briskly, and assured him that if he won, she would treat him very well. Then, Hongkwai took Diem to the stage and introduced Judy's background. Judy was a major sponsor in Long Than. Her husband used to be a billionaire reconciliation judge. If he won this match, he would be considered stable in grade 6. Clinging tightly to her thigh, he was sure to rise rapidly. After a few days, Diem and Hongkwai became familiar with each other. He said as long as he wasn't forced to sell himself, he could fight anyone, even a tiger. As he stepped onto the stage, Diem began to think randomly. If she was wealthy, then 3 million would probably be a small number to her. Just then, seeing his opponent enter the stage, Diem quickly focused his mind and prepared to start warming up his limbs. His opponent this time was named Kadamanami, a wanted criminal who had committed multiple murders in Donga. He possessed a high-level Okinawa martial art and had won 3 consecutive matches, resulting in 2 deaths and 1 injury among his opponents. The injured person had both arms broken by him. The white flag fell in the middle of the stage, signaling the start of the match. Diem attacked first, rushing towards Kadamanami. He aimed a strike at Kadamanami's throat, who quickly raised his hand to block it, and then dodged Diem's dangerous green dragon move. His right hand quickly locked Kadamanami's arm to try and break it to get the Diem Phu. In her private room, Judy watched the match, sweating coldly. She thought Diem's life was over. She had witnessed this scene tonight before. However, Kadamanami had not yet used his strength. Diem kicked him with his leg, sending Kadamanami flying. Hongkwai, seeing this, whispered to himself, acknowledging that Diem was truly formidable. After landing a hit, Diem calmly announced the name of his technique, Kok Nu, passed down from the Southern Martial Arts School of Backhatsmen. Today, I will pay my respects to my master, he said, before unleashing a flurry of strikes towards Kadamanami. The relentless assault forced Kadamanami to retreat hastily. Diem then swung his fist continuously towards Kadamanami, and eventually, the match ended with Diem's overwhelming dominance. The entire audience in the martial arts arena fell into a stunned silence for 20 seconds before erupting into enthusiastic cheers. Diem, after pulling back his fist, stood still, breathing a sigh of relief. He calmly regained his composure even when going to the restroom. This was the first time in his life that he had killed someone. However, for someone like Kadamanami, Diem didn't feel any remorse. He understood that this was not a place for compassion. In his mind, he had made up his determination. I'm here now. 3 million, novels, and everything else must be grasped in my hands. Back in the rest area, Diem noticed that everyone emitted a red light, a special ability when traveling in Diem Phu. Enemies would emit a red light, with the intensity indicating the level of threat, similar to Tiuka. Diem's master arrived and handed him a sum of money, saying it was from Judy for him to buy decent clothes for tomorrow. He also instructed Diem to open a bank account, as the winnings from the bet would be transferred there. After bidding farewell, Diem waited until A2 dispersed before taking her home. However, as they arrived at her doorstep, Diem suddenly felt excruciating pain, causing him to collapse and lose consciousness. After some time, he woke up, still feeling the pain, but it gradually subsided. He quickly took pain relief medication and pondered about his current situation before eventually drifting off to sleep. The next day, Hong Kwai gave Diem a mobile phone and instructed him to dress neatly as he would be meeting Judy. After parting ways, Diem traversed through the narrow alleys, encountering a scuffle between a young man and a girl. The man was berating and hitting the girl, while she continuously apologized. Diem recognized the girl as A2, the one who had guided him before. Without hesitation, Diem intervened, swiftly disarming the man and protecting A2. The man's lackeys surrounded Diem, but he remained undaunted. Diem confronted the man, who recognized Hong Kwai and quickly apologized before leaving with his entourage. Diem and Hong Kwai then continued their conversation over a meal, reflecting on the events of the previous night. As they talked and ate, they suddenly heard a commotion outside. Diem rushed to the scene and found himself in a confrontation with another person who possessed military-style combat skills. Both of them instinctively engaged in a lock, recognizing each other's expertise. They eventually backed off from each other, realizing they were evenly matched. At this moment, Diem could clearly see that the person in front of him was a man around 30 years old, wearing worn-out clothes and with a scar clearly visible on his forehead. He smiled and apologized to Diem. Through the conversation, Diem learned that his name was Handong, and they were from the same hometown. Handong brought a group of people to Hong Kong to seek opportunities to get rich. While they were chatting cheerfully, Diem's phone rang. It was Hong Kwai calling. He instructed Diem that there were hidden thugs in the building where he lived, and the police had been informed. He advised Diem to be careful not to go out to avoid being harmed. Hearing this, Diem quickly ended the call, telling Handong that his friend was drunk. However, Handong had heard everything clearly. Just then, A2, the girl looking for a cat, appeared in front of them. Seeing A2, Diem was startled, quickly knelt down and asked if she had any loose change to help him buy candy. A2 nodded and hugged the cat, running to the street. She reminded Diem to wait for her here. Watching A2's figure, Diem slowly turned back, unaware that Handong was looking at him ominously from behind. A gun was pointed ominously at his head. "Please forgive me," Diem murmured. "I don't want to do this either." He stared silently at Handong, who held the gun firmly, indicating regular training. At this moment, a red light flickered in Diem's eyes. A quick glance marked the target, who was trembling. Diem received information: the remaining soul of 9 bird heads. If he failed, his points and the right to purchase items would be wiped out. The more artifacts appeared within a 5 kilometers radius, the greater his reward would be. Luckily, the system would notify him if there were any artifacts nearby, or else it would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. Handong's status was weary, slightly injured. His gun was hot, reaching 39%. He had deep training skills, enhancing his overall combat abilities. The threat level was down to black. Despite having the system's support, Diem remained motionless. He knew that if he made any sudden moves, Handong wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger. While his master's 8 weird techniques and his martial arts skills were at 81%, they were useless against a gun. Handong then pushed Diem through several alleys to a small, discreet clinic. Upon entering, Handong immediately ordered his men to tie Diem up. Diem thought to himself that Handong was being cautious. The doctor in the room walked out, seeing Handong bringing someone in, then grumbled and complained. Handong laughed, saying he would pay extra. Immediately, the doctor's attitude changed, saying they were all friends and should help each other. However, as soon as the doctor turned his back, he was shot by Handong. He said the police were looking for them too quickly, suspecting the doctor the most, so he decided to send him away. Handong instructed his men to prepare to leave immediately. Diem thought Handong was indeed a decisive and ruthless character. Now was not the time to delay. If he didn't leave soon, he would be surrounded and unable to escape. A man named Than asked about Tew Kim, and Handong quickly approached Tew Kim, telling him that in Hong Kong, robbers weren't sentenced to death. He hoped Tew Kim would stay behind to get treatment in return when things were calmer. Tew Kim listened in disbelief. This was his older brother, the one he trusted the most. Just then, a man yelled out, accusing Handong of betraying their comrades, and Handong pointed his gun at him. The two argued, and the man, furious, kicked the suitcase on the table. Money spilled out, and two faded golden ancient papers fell to the ground. Diem saw the opportunity and quickly grabbed a surgical knife from the tray, grabbed Than, and stabbed him in the throat, saying to Handong, "I'm taking the knife out. He'll die instantly." Handong stepped back and went to attack another man holding a gun. The man quickly picked up the gun and fired, but thanks to the framework, Diem avoided the bullet. He struck the man and he fell dead. At this point, seeing his comrades killed, Handong's eyes turned red. He endured the pain to leave the gun behind. Diem didn't hesitate, grabbing the surgical knife from the tray and preparing to finish Handong off. But just as Diem felt his leg being held back, it was Tew Kim on the bed, holding onto him tightly, trying to stop him, and giving Handong time to escape. Diem turned back and swiftly swung his arm, using the surgical knife to stab directly into Tew Kim's solar plexus. Tew Kim's death helped Handong gain precious time. By now, he had picked up the gun from the ground. Diem leaped forward, thrusting the surgical knife in his hand downward, while Handong also raised his hand, aiming the black gun directly at Diem. The sound of gunfire echoed in the silent room, and the system's voice echoed in Diem's head. Target status: critical condition. Duration: 9 minutes, 43 seconds. Unable to find the target's weak spot. 5 pink points depleted to cancel the target lock. Target eliminated. 2 puzzle pieces obtained for the copybook collection. Event Diem Phu officially launched this time. Note: the more puzzle pieces obtained, the greater the advantage. Additionally, within a few minutes, Diem had defeated 4 ruthless robbers. He went to Long Than police station and sat in the long hallway after filing a report, absorbing the newly acquired information. Handong and his gang had just robbed a bank and kidnapped a batch of artifacts. Initially planning to auction off 5 original artifacts, he hadn't expected to randomly obtain 2 pieces. Were the remaining 3 pieces already sold? With 2 pieces acquired, the event was officially initiated. Following the mission instructions from the system, the most important thing this time was to awaken the heritage from Long Than police station. Diem met Hong Kwai waiting for him. Seeing his annoyed expression, Hong Kwai quickly said that they too had informed him, so how could he arrive so quickly? Also, Judy had deposited bail for him outside. People were waiting for him there, so he should remember to thank her. Seeing Diem's discomfort, Hong Kwai added that she was worth hundreds of billions, tall and beautiful. She even pursued him, but he still wouldn't give in. Next, Judy draped her arm around Diem, like a couple shopping together. That night, in a luxurious restaurant, Diem and Judy sat facing each other. Judy was satisfied, looking at the suit he had personally chosen for Diem. Meanwhile, Diem felt extremely regretful about the price of the suit, equivalent to a cell-enhancing pill. Seeing Judy's charming appearance, Diem asked quietly what she understood about him. Judy replied, "I can understand why someone would spend money to put a fighter in the arena. But I find it hard to understand why a woman would invite a murderer who just killed 4 people to dinner." Instead of answering Diem's question, she asked him what he thought when he saw her. Diem took a slow drag of his cigarette and said he thought she was worth hundreds of billions. If he were desperate, he would kidnap her. Just a little demand would be enough to live a lifetime. Judy's eyes flashed with surprise as she looked at the dreamy smiling Diem. The night ended, and Diem walked alone in the dark alley. Suddenly, his chest felt like it was on fire. The system notified him of the location of an artifact piece. "Attention, receive the target. It's only 10 meters away." A 3D map of Long Than suddenly appeared before him, and Diem stared intently at the target, chasing after it. Passing through 7 or 8 narrow alleys, the system announced the end of the 1-minute time limit. Although he couldn't catch up, he had at least confirmed that he still had 2 artifact pieces in his possession. Surprisingly, he encountered Tiu Chao and Kuka here, and the 3 of them sat down to chat. When Kuka asked why he was here, Diem said he was chasing after thieves who stole his wallet. Hearing this, Kuka laughed and said he was already famous but dared to steal. Indeed, he was a hero in Than. Then they talked about Tiu Chao, who had used Chinese martial arts to defeat a group from Thailand. Suddenly, Diem asked Kuka about selling heirlooms, making Tiu Chao break out in a cold sweat, wondering how he could be so short of money. No wonder he was paired with Judy. After that, they arranged to meet at the arena, and Diem returned, sitting on a bench, murmuring while holding 2 artifact pieces. 9-headed bird, the strange Kwang eyes, and the fat guy who calls himself Mac. All are mythical figures. From the ancient legends, there is no basis, but it was the fat guy who brought me to Than. This camp is truly extraordinary and magical. There's a hoarse voice that calls me Diem Phu, the wandering traveler. So what is Diem Phu? And the person holding that ancient artifact, whenever I approach, he moves away. He seems to be aware of my existence. In other words, I am not the only traveler in this world. The other party acts so cautiously. It seems not easy to deal with. Perhaps those who become Diem Phu imposters are not ordinary. Currently, points are scarce. I can only buy cell enhancement drugs beforehand. Otherwise, getting sick on the floor would be troublesome, resulting in a direct loss of 10 points. Diem Phu buys cell enhancement drugs. The medicine takes effect immediately. Shortly afterward, Diem feels his eyelids heavy, then slowly sinks into sleep. The next day, when Diem opens his eyes, he feels refreshed, without any discomfort from illness. Diem stands up, rotates his palms, bounces on his feet, then suddenly unleashes internal strength, circulating power like a dragon. Terrifying strength hitting the wall, causing a loud noise. At that moment, in a high classroom of the fucking building, Hong Kui holds a stack of documents, reading diligently, and asks the middle-aged man opposite, why did they two personally go to meet Tu Thien Tu? He is Liu Tritom, the #1 combat manager of the Than camp. Looking at the stack of papers, he says softly, they two personally met him, mainly because of Tu Thien Tu's grandfather, Tu Thuongdien, the direct disciple of Diem Than, one of the 4 great celestial kings of Vinsuan, who won 32 consecutive matches at the Than arena, making everyone afraid to challenge. Than's underground arena of the fucking building. Diem sits in the stands, watching the match attentively. Down there, Tiu Cha and a strong man enter the field, each holding 2 knives, while Tiu Ka carries a tiger claw handlock. Compared to weapons, Tiu Ta's tiger claw handlock is somewhat disadvantaged, but considering the situation, Tiu Ka still holds the upper hand. Diem is engrossed in watching when a slender white hand pats his shoulder, and a voice asks if he minds someone sitting next to him. Diem looks up to see a girl in sportswear, with T-shaped eyebrows, long ponytail down to her waist. Diem smiles at the girl without any annoyance. The girl lazily pouts, her long slender thighs showing no excess fat, her perfect figure clearly displayed. She sits next to Diem, takes out a small bottle of wine from her bag, and takes a sip. The strong scent of wine fills the air. Diem chuckles and says, women don't usually drink white wine. She wipes her mouth and replies, it's become a habit that's hard to break. The girl calmly watches the 2 fighters on the floor and slowly explains, the legal authority is Than, while the martial arts moves belong to Long's refined Hawkeye style, within the extreme realm of Lang's road flower fist. Than's great horse stance, the flexible defense of Lang's road fist, blending the 2 seamlessly to achieve such mastery, can be considered the highest level. This kid is quite talented. Tiu Cha now firmly holds the upper hand, advancing his foot, knees striking his opponent's chin, causing him to lose balance and revealing a vulnerability. Tiu Ka lands a strong punch, knocking out his opponent, ending the match. Hearing the girl's muttered words, Diem's enthusiasm drops. He asks if she likes watching martial arts. She seems quite knowledgeable about traditional martial arts. The girl smiles and says, "When I was young, I studied under the baton of the master Truong Than Tan, considered the successor of the Bat Quay headmaster Don Thi." Then Lady Im inquires about the martial arts headmaster on the arena. Did she watch him fight? Could she tell him more about him? The girl tilts her head and gently says, "He's not fighting today, and I don't pay attention to his appearance, only his fighting style. It's not orthodox Bat Quay, probably originating from some northern wandering martial arts schools. This guy is going to run into big trouble. You should be careful if you want to buy him." Lady Im thinks for a moment and asks for her name. The girl tilts her head to look at Lady Im with a gentle smile. "I'm from the Du family, Du Thuk. Those who know me in the male martial arts community call me Thaitu." Lady Im is greatly surprised. "So, you're Thaitu, the authority behind Long Than. I didn't know your subordinate." Before Lady Im can speak, her charming voice rings out, "What's his name, Lady Im?" Thaitu, the imposing figure of Long Than, doesn't even know his subordinate. Judy approaches with a smile, her seductive figure captivating everyone's gaze. She sits next to Lady Im, wraps her arm around him, and says, "You don't even know your boss's boss. Hong Kwai hasn't told you." Du Thuk tilts her head to look at Lady Im. "So, you're the pride of Hong Kwai. Thought you were just here for fun. Everyone at the fucking Gia building calls me Thaitu. So, you should too from now on," she says, looking at Judy. "It's been a long time since we met." Judy's expression briefly changed, but she still forced a smile and said, "It's been a long time, Thaitu, and you're still as beautiful as ever. However, women should take care of their appearance." Thaitu didn't seem bothered and replied, "Mrs. Dang is absolutely right. I'll remember that, Mrs. Dang. Oh, by the way, if there's any suitable cosmetics for me, please introduce them to me." After hearing Mrs. Dang's words 3 times, Judy said in annoyance, "All right, I have to go deal with something before." Then she grabbed Lady Im and led him away into a private room. Judy angrily threw her purse on the floor and muttered, "This woman must be deliberately calling me that." Lady Im handed Judy a glass of wine and chuckled lightly. Although they had just met not long ago, this was the first time he had seen her angry like this. Taking the glass of wine, Judy asked with a wrinkled face, "Why are you still laughing? How did you feel when you first met the boss behind the scenes? Is she beautiful?" Lady Im replied seriously, "She's my boss, so of course she's beautiful. But still not as beautiful as you." Judy looked at Lady Im in silence, thinking to herself, "If they too can win Hong Kwai's wholehearted loyalty, then I can do the same with Lady Im." Then Judy pulled Lady Im to a small window and said, "Do you know? Recently, there have been many strong newcomers at Long Than. They're already very powerful." She pointed down to the arena. At that moment, a match had just ended, and a man lay motionless on the ground, his neck bleeding heavily, clearly unable to survive. His opponent stood beside him, wearing a scary mask, his weapon resembling a nose-slicing knife made of steel, with his entire body made of cold iron. The fresh blood looked very strange. Lady Im was slightly surprised to see that. Landiantau is the unique weapon of the wandering martial artist faction from the north. Although it looks like a nose-slicing knife, it's actually a lethal weapon. Then Lady Im asked Judy if she wanted to bet on him. Judy stood next to Lady Im and gently said, "This newcomer named Von Hai is Hak Suang Hong's disciple. Hak Suang Hong is very arrogant, so she's annoyed with him and doesn't want to lose to him. How confident are you in facing him?" Lady Im smiled and replied to make her feel sad, "I'm sure I have a 120% chance." Judy laughed, thinking Lady Im was joking. Then she took a roll of film from the table, intending to show Lady Im his fighting style. But Lady Im stopped her hand from behind and hugged Judy, making her blush as he said seriously, "I mean it when I say 120%. Judy looked at Lady Im with closed eyes and lightly kissed his cheek. Lady Im was taken aback. Judy took advantage of the opportunity to escape from Lady Im's embrace, muttering to herself, "This guy is definitely trying to flirt with me." At that moment, the system's voice suddenly sounded, reporting the location of any ancient artifacts that had been found. "Please pay attention. Diem quickly woke up and went to the window to look down at the arena. Von Hai had taken off his scary mask, revealing a childish face, and his opponent was standing beside him. Diem smiled and said nothing. "Hello, both of you. Let's activate the reddest array system together." Both sides of the system simultaneously sounded. "You have found your companion on the rooftop of the Fucking building." Analyzing the current situation in his head, Diem realized that his companion had just found Trong Min Vien. The information he knew about him was that he had the highest level red array skills and a 69% proficiency in ancient martial arts. Knowing nothing else, a companion was someone who traveled together. Conflicts of interest might arise, but the goal was the same. Killing a companion wouldn't be rewarded. Looking at his current event progress, he only needed to win 2 more matches to reach rank 6. As for the ancient artifacts, he only had 2. He still had no clue how to awaken the soul of Kugadiyu, but there was no rule saying he had to do it alone. The principle was that this task could be completed with Von He's help. However, the Diem Phu event also depended on the number of ancient artifacts found. The more pieces there were, the higher the rewards. With only 5 pieces in total, it was difficult to determine who had more or less. At that moment, the rooftop door suddenly opened, and Trong Min Vien stepped forward, standing about 2 to 3 meters away from Diem, silently staring at him and saying bluntly, "I don't like beating around the bush. Give me your 2 pieces of ancient artifacts, and I'll find Kudadiyu's soul within this time frame. Earn some more points and wait for the right time to leave." Then he looked at Diem and asked urgently, "Do you agree?" Diem replied coldly, "Long Than is complicated and chaotic. Our game could be very troublesome. You've trained in martial arts since childhood, but you're still immature. Instead of facing gangsters like me, it's cleaner to fight on the arena. Are you afraid that I won't agree?" Diem saw through Trong Min Vien's thoughts, making him tremble with fear, his forehead covered in cold sweat. Diem walked straight past Trong Min Vien and said, "See you tomorrow on the arena." As soon as he finished speaking, Trong Min Vien let out a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, Diem also noticed the person holding the ancient artifact, who always appeared and disappeared. It wasn't Trong Min Vien. Just as he returned to Judy's room, a blonde-haired man walked out from the room, looking down at Diem and smiling. "Diem Guam, huh? Tomorrow, I'll see who the real Diem Guam is." After saying that, he hugged a charming girl and left. Surprised, Diem entered the room to see Judy standing by the window, while Hongkwai sat silently on the sofa. Seeing Diem enter, Judy asked softly, "Hey Diem, what kind of weapon do you need? I'll ask Hongkwai to prepare it for you." At this point, Diem also guessed what was going on. It seemed that the blonde man who had just left was Trong Min Vien's backup. This time, they would probably have to fight with weapons. Trong Min Vien's weapon was the Landian Ta octagonal club, which had many strange properties. Diem pondered for a moment and said, "Hongkwai, help me prepare a sword, at least 1 meter long, preferably 1.3 meters. Hongkwai was surprised and said, "I'll prepare it right away. I arranged it this afternoon." Hongkwai led Diem to a small ice cream shop on the 2nd floor. Sitting opposite each other in silence, the atmosphere was somewhat heavy. Hongkwai knew that Diem's opponent this time was not ordinary and asked if Diem had gone for a health checkup as he had suggested last time. Diem took a puff of his cigarette and said softly, "Hongkwai, you don't need to worry too much. I know my own health." Diem looked at Hongkwai thoughtfully. Hongkwai was a good person, whether he was sincere or not. He really took care of him a lot. Seeing Diem's calm demeanor, Hongkwai's heart grew heavier. They too had mentioned that when watching Diem fight, he showed signs of weakness or illness. There were things Diem didn't want to tell Hongkwai, but Hongkwai didn't need to care. Hongkwai said, "Diem, you've only been in Longthan for about 10 days. I don't want to worry about you too soon. If things don't work out, you can rest for a while and go with Judy. I'll take care of you." Diem felt Hongkwai's concern was sincere. In his heart, he thought if he could really live here, it might not be a bad thing. Then he smiled and said to Hongkwai, "Your personality doesn't really suit the underworld." Hong Kwai laughed bitterly. Thaitu said the same thing. When Diem heard about Thaitu, he looked Hong Kwai straight in the eye and said seriously, "Will Thaitu watch me fight tomorrow?" Hong Kwai, a little embarrassed, asked, "She may watch depending on her schedule." "Why do you ask?" Diem took a sip of his strong wine and said sternly, "She must watch me fight after this match." On the way back to his apartment, Diem muttered to himself, "The smell of rotten fish in this alley is getting stronger every day. It's disgusting." When he got home, someone knocked on the door. Opening it, he saw Atu's innocent face. She came to bring him a lunchbox. She heard he was living alone, so her mother made some barbecued pork for him. "Thank you for taking care of me," Diem said happily as he accepted it. "On days when you come home late, my mother often brings food for you," Atu said. Thinking so, he told Atu, "Atu, your house nearby doesn't have lights on at night, only candles. Is the light broken, or did I go over to fix it?" Atu suddenly lowered her head, her face grim, and declined Diem's offer before leaving. Though Diem didn't understand Atu's attitude, he didn't think too much about it. When he entered Atu's house, a strong, foul odor emanated from the room. Atu's eyes dimmed as she entered the room. At the Fuckinghia building for the underground fight, the arena was crowded with people. Diem held a sharp sword, 1.3 meters long, with a wide blade shining brightly, blood staining the blade's surface. Engraved on the blade were 8 large characters. The key creates countless achievements, completing the dragon strike. Diem stood in a fighting stance, silently admiring the excellent sword. In the audience, Judy worriedly asked Hong Kwai, "Where did this sword come from? Can we trust it?" Hong Kwai calmly replied, "Don't worry, this is Thaitu's personal treasure, a weapon bathed in blood. There should be no problem." In the stands, Duthuk sat among the crowd, silently pondering. With Diem's current health condition, he wouldn't be able to withstand the Home Keem's fierce attacks. But that guy wasn't a fool seeking death, or was he mistaken? At that moment, Truong Minh Vien also stepped onto the stage, ripping off his cloak to reveal the Landiantau club, 90 centimeters long, with a shining blade, 4 inches wide and 2 inches thick, and a pointed mouth like a bird's beak, slightly curved. Recalling the red array system, seeing that Diem's ancient martial arts level reached 81%, 12% higher than his own, Truong Minh Vien knew he had to exert all his effort to have a chance at winning. Both sides greeted each other, introducing themselves. Truong Minh Vien, the disciple of Chi Tu Man, and Diem, He Jiang. Truong Minh Vien held the club in one hand, his legs slightly bent, drawing a circle on the ground with his right foot. Then using force to leap, his eyes revealing a cold and ruthless look as he aimed the club straight at Diem's face. Diem swung his left hand, his fingers curved, straight into the club's body, the force so strong that Truong Minh Vien's hand trembled. His attack pushed back. Seizing the opportunity, Diem tightened his grip on the sword, swinging it upwards, aiming at Truong Minh Vien's left arm. The sword gleamed brightly, cold and sharp. If this strike succeeded, Truong Minh Vien's arm would be paralyzed or even severed. Sensing the dire situation, Truong Minh Vien swiftly turned his wrist, gripping Landiantau tightly, and swung back, slashing straight towards Diem's solar plexus. Diem hurriedly dodged, but still received a deep, jolting wound on his face. Truly, no opponent could be underestimated. With his left hand slightly bent, fingers forming a bird-like shape, Truong Minh Vien aimed straight for the pressure point on Truong Minh Vien's wrist. Truong Minh Vien grimaced in pain, letting go of Landiantau involuntarily. Seizing the opportunity, Diem swung his sword directly at Truong Minh Vien's face, almost instinctively. Drawing upon his core strength, Truong Minh Vien quickly backed away from Diem's attack. He Jiang Lai, expertly wielding his sword, Diem tightly gripping the hilt, and his left hand holding the Lam Diem guard, finally breathed a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, although Truong Minh Vien managed to evade Diem's lethal strike, his left arm still suffered a deep wound from the sword, blood incessantly flowing onto the ground. In the blink of an eye, Truong Minh Vien was injured in his left arm, losing his weapon in the high-class box above the stands. Hak Suanghong looked at Trong Minvian, his expression darkening. To him, Trong Minvian's life was worth little. He was merely losing face in front of Judy, which was unbearable for him. Meanwhile, Judy remained smiling, no longer showing the concern she had before. On the arena floor, Diem threw Landianta aside, crouched down, and lunged towards Trong Minvian's small, sharp sword held in his hand, aiming for Trong Minvian's legs. Trong Minvian quickly leaped up, avoiding Diem's attack in mid-air. With his left foot, he kicked Diem's hand holding the sword, then kicked across Diem's face with his right foot. Diem supported himself with his right hand, twisting his waist, and the sword drew a circular trajectory, directly slashing upwards. Seeing the dangerous situation, knowing that failure to avoid would likely result in being cut in half, Trong Minvian reluctantly let go, and thousands of people in the air fell to the ground. Before Trong Minvian could catch his breath, the merciless sword descended straight towards him. Trong Minvian couldn't dodge in time. His right arm was struck by a long blow. However, instead of retreating, he took advantage of the moment the sword descended and rushed to attack Diem. Seeing this, Diem quickly exerted force, and the falling sword resembled a deer's fang, stabbing straight towards Trong Minvian. Trong Minvian swiftly leaped up, both feet kicking straight onto the blade, with such force that the sword fell to the ground, slamming heavily onto the arena floor. At this moment, within Trong Minvian, a fierce beast from ancient times emerged. The decisive moment of the battle had arrived. Trong Minvian leaped up, his heel kicking fiercely into Diem's chest in mid-air, then spinning and kicking towards Diem's hand holding the sword, causing him to be hit in the mouth, blood oozing. The system announced that Trong Minvian was facing the power of the Kai Min beast. He could obtain some information about the beast. Did he want to sacrifice a Diem Phu point to view it? Diem agreed to exchange points, and the system displayed that Trong Minvian's status had changed to the Inner Soul skill, adding a new skill, the inherited Kai Min Beast Inner Soul. Every attack would carry the power of the Kai Min Beast, burning the opponent's soul each time, and could be attached to any weapon, with effectiveness at long range only 30% compared to close range. Intense pain. Diem released the sword, dropping it to the ground, just as Trong Minvian landed, blood gushing from his shattered heel. A heavy kick slammed into Diem's shoulder, causing excruciating pain. Diem knew his right arm was disabled, and he himself was thrown away, crashing heavily into the arena wall. In the blink of an eye, the situation reversed. Trong Minvian's right foot, enveloped in the power of the Kai Min beast, emitted a faint red light. Then a flying kick sent the sword flying into Diem's hand, stabbing straight towards him. Diem's eyes were ice cold, staring intently at Trong Minvian. "What is your Truong Datin at this moment?" Trong Minvian's eyes were vacant, answering almost subconsciously, "My sister." Diem fell silent for a moment, grabbing Trong Minvian's collar, threateningly saying, "You shattered my right arm. I will leave a lasting scar. Should I kill you for revenge?" Then, Diem threw Trong Minvian off the arena. Trong Minvian fell heavily to the ground, then stood up. He couldn't help but ask, "How could you have learned the Trok Kwok Man's evasion technique?" Upon hearing Trong Minvian's question, Diem gritted his teeth and replied, "Ask your sister about that. She's in the room." Hong Kuei breathed a sigh of relief, finally letting go of the tension in his heart, while Judy smiled triumphantly, her body drenched in sweat. She said to Hong Kuei, "You should go outside. Remember to close the door when you go back to the restroom." Diem endured the pain of his dislocated shoulder, returning to its original position, looking at his reflection in the mirror. He silently resolved to win one more battle to complete his first mission. When he threw away his sword, I was really worried he would lose. Tiu Chao's voice suddenly sounded behind Diem. Diem responded lightly, "Are you so free that you come to watch me fight? Who will you fight with?" Tiu Chao replied, "A youngster from Vinexuen." Diem licked his lips, turned back to Tiu Ka, and warned him to be careful not to capsize the boat in the gutter. Although Diem had a rebellious temperament and few peers in the martial arts world, he genuinely admired Tiu Cha, a person with a tough exterior but a warm heart. In this age of declining traditional martial arts, Masters like Tiu Cha were rare. At that moment, someone outside the door announced that Tiu Cha's match was about to begin. Tiu Cha walked towards the door, then turned around and said to Diem Than, the showman, "He's not really a big shot." Without hesitation, he left. Diem was taken aback, suspecting. Could it be that wealth cannot seduce, power cannot subdue, and poverty cannot change his will? Speak your mind clearly, then lead with dignity, intellectual. You thought I was selling myself to Judy, huh? Diem muttered to himself. This kid is from the underworld and still wants to teach me. However, his style is indeed commendable. Underneath the arena, Tiu Cha was warming up, while his representative reminded him that his opponent was no ordinary person, very ruthless. In 10 matches, the opponent either died or was disabled. Don't hold back, the representative cautioned. Tiu Cha lightly laughed. I've never held back, just don't need to kill them all. On the arena floor, Tiu Cha didn't use the tiger's lock grip, but held a 9-ring broadsword. His opponent was a handsome young man, about 18 or 19 years old, difficult to predict as a ruthless person. The young man looked at Tiu Cha, smiled, and said, "Life and death on the arena, regardless." Tiu Cha smirked, not responding, just nodded to Doja Qian and Cha Dai Dao, and the youth imitated, nodding to Vinexuan and Tu Thien Tu. The battle between Tiu Cha and Tu Thien Tu finally began. Tu Thien Tu drew his weapon, the Batran Dao, a technique, and a name of Vinexuan. The blade was shorter and narrower, its sharp edge piercing directly, every move deadly. Tiu Cha's eyes were slightly cold, knowing his opponent was no ordinary person, no longer underestimating. The broadsword swung wide, each move full of authority. Tu Thien Tu's Batran Dao also relied on speed. Both sides clashed with speed. In the blink of an eye, they exchanged 10 strikes. Tu Thien Tu's Dao was slightly faster, but Tiu Cha changed his breathing rhythm, the broadsword slashing straight towards Tu Thien Tu's eyes. Tu Thien Tu dodged to the side, and the two clashed blades. The battle was relentless, still a speed contest. In the blink of an eye, Tiu Cha had struck 21 times. His broadsword was fierce. At this point, Tu Thien Tu could only defend. Blocking horizontally, one blade swung up, leaping back defensively, covering his whole body. Tiu Cha held his broadsword with both hands, raising it high, each swing aggressive. Tu Thien Tu hurriedly stepped back, using the most effective evasion technique. Tiu Cha's broadsword gradually accelerated its steps, the extreme flower technique, combined with the 9-ring broadsword, striking continuously, causing Tu Thien Tu to retreat continuously.